The Village of Cary for Tuesday, July 16th, 2019. To order with roll call, please.
Betts? Here. Cavelli? Here. Kraus?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Weinhammer? Here. Collier?
Here.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now moving to the public comment where public can address the committee of the whole. I think everybody here is for something on the agenda, so we'll go ahead and close public comments at 7:26. Moving to the discussion regarding the McRide and Pace transportation programs. Eric.
Thank you, Mayor. At one of the previous Committee of the Whole meetings, the staff was asked to look into some additional information and provide some data based on the different transit services available. That was related to the previous discussion on the participation for the MC Ride program. So this evening, Management Analyst Courtney Sage will provide some updates answering some of those questions. That was based on information provided by both Pace and McHenry County. And we do have representatives from both those organizations here if you have any questions for them as well.
Here's just the map that you all saw last time for MC Ride and their coverage area. So then you'll see some new information here with the weekend ridership as well as the weekday evening ridership. You asked staff to get some ridership data on between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. and then also Saturdays and Sundays. It's showing you the total trips as well as either how many trips were in the evening or how many were on Saturday and Sunday. One thing to note is that Sunday trips began starting January 1st, 2019. So that's why you only see it for the sample month of February. The Sunday trips are still growing. On average, there have been approximately 125 Sunday trips per month so far.
And as you might recall, the evening hours, service hours, and the weekend service hours, that is one of the main differences between the three options that are currently available to Cary residents for Dial-A-Ride transit services. MC Ride being the only operator that has services after 5 p.m. and on the weekend.
And another note would just be because some of the MC Rides employment, school, and then the trips to the Pioneer Center take place only on the weekday, that could also show why the percentage of weekend trips is lower.
So can you just go back to that real quick? So the evening, what qualifies for evening? Is that after 4 or 5 or?
So those evening weekday ridership trips are only between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m.
Okay.
Yes.
And this is for everybody for McRide, correct? Everyone that's utilizing the system right now, the
Yeah.
service? Okay.
So here is just a reminder of the map for the Southeast McHenry Pace service. And then here is just some of the data that was provided. This data is from 2016 with 2 sample months. And what you're going to see on the top graph is how many trips originated out of Cary or their destination was a Cary address. And then the total trips as well. So you can see that it is utilized quite a bit by either Cary residents or people coming to Cary. And then the bottom is showing you that around 36% of trips are going to or from Pioneer Center. And that is all trips, not just ones originating or coming from Cary.
It's total trips.
Yes.
I have a couple questions about this. Why did we get July and October data only? And how come those 2 months, I guess?
One was to kind of match up with the months that were given to us for MC Ride, and these were also available.
Okay.
It's also probably good to show the summer compared to out of summers.
Okay. And I apologize, but what is the Pioneer Center?
Social services,
Okay.
Special needs.
especially, yeah.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
believe it's located in McHenry,
Yeah.
the city of McHenry.
Okay. Thank you.
And then here is just that summary table that was provided last time as well, just showing you the difference in operating hours, fare, and annual cost of village. So if there are any questions, let us
As we
know.
mentioned, Mary Donner from PACE is here, and we have McHenry, the transportation plan is from McHenry County as well.
And they're excited to answer questions.
They made the trip.
Mary, do you want to come up and give us a, no?
No, actually,
Please come up to the podium.
the only thing that I think I would have to say this evening about the Southeast McHenry County Dial-A-Ride is that it's been around since pretty much forever. Originally, it was funded by grant money. It was a specific route. And when that went away, PACE made a decision to continue offering service to the area because we're not going to let, if there was transportation, you don't just take it away. So it became the Southeast McHenry County Dial-A-Ride. It has no input from anybody, but it does take care of some of the people who are running, who live in that particular area to get, the original destination was for Spring Hill Mall. That you could get to there from here, which is very nice, or that you could get to the Crystal Lake Metro. But it's lost its footing since we've started MC Ride, because all of the communities that are part of MC Ride contribute to that. And you can get a lot further than you can on the southeast portion of the Dial-A-Ride service. And it's very constricted. It's not like it's just all there. You have to have all the other vehicles being used. If they aren't being used, that's why they get full when they do, but there's not that many trips that they make. If there's anything else that you need to know, they're the people who know the best about what's going on in McHenry County. I can just tell you what PACE does. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Did anybody have any questions for
Can
me?
you go back to the map for McBride, please? Thank you.
And Scott or Susan, would you like to add anything to the service? You're right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Brecky. I'm a transportation planner at the county. I'll just answer your questions if you have any.
Did you want to kind of give us your overview on what McHenry County feels about this?
Yeah, and Courtney did a great job of summing up the programs. MC Ride is just a great effort for consolidation of all of these various Dial-A-Ride programs that have been out there. It's constantly changing and, meeting the needs of the communities that are partnering. Everything about, the hours, the partners, the fares is all fluid. For example, we are adding Hebron starting in September. So it is, the nice part is having people that sit on a committee together, our Public Transportation Advisory Committee. It's nice to be able to have a hand in shaping this program how we want it. As Mary mentioned, there's not a ton that we can do with the Southeast. And I mean, in fact, we have zero. The county has zero input into the Southeast. It's kind of a black box for us. But the MC Ride program, we do have a hand in being able to shape that.
Isn't the county doing a whole study to come up with something in the next couple of years for transportation? Aren't they in the process of that?
Last year, 2018, we did a transit plan update, so that is completed
Okay, there's
now.
one going to be done in 2020?
Not transit again.
Okay.
No, so all of that is completed, and, the goal, our long-term goal is to move MC Ride to be a countywide program. That's our long-term goal. That's not going to happen in the next year or two. Obviously, there's a lot of financial considerations. There's a lot of just capital as far as having enough buses and drivers and funding to do that. One thing that we always like to point out with MC Ride, when you were talking, Courtney, about the evening and the weekend trips, unlike a fixed route, which it runs no matter what, in Dial-A-Ride, if no one's out there making a reservation, the bus isn't running. So we're really only paying for service when people are making the trip reservations.
And Courtney, do we have any information on what Cary residents are using the Algonquin Township bus? I mean, because this is all Pace and McBride. Do we have anything that shows? I'm just trying to figure out how many people are really utilizing everything, everywhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we do have, it was in the previous presentation. Eric, do you have that on you? Give me just a moment.
And if you don't, that's fine. I can get it later. I'm just trying to find out all the different avenues that are available to our residents.
Area residents do use MC Ride also, even though it doesn't come to the village.
Right.
I get unique rider information, so there is the need out there and people are still riding it. All you have to do is be in the service area. You don't have to be a resident of the service area. So if someone took a train into it, they could still travel on it. So I think, that even when you're not having service here, to just show that people are already riding it and making an effort to use it is kind of interesting.
So that's kind of what I was getting at. If someone could take something from another avenue to get somewhere that it was going and hop on it, they wouldn't be, it's wherever it's picking up and taking to is where they can utilize it.
For sure. I mean, transfers, it's called a transfer, right? A bus transfer, a train transfer. And that's definitely possible. It's just challenging. It's challenging to have to make a reservation and try and time that reservation with a different program's reservation. And maybe you'll have to wait if this is running, if the township is late and ours is,
Sure.
It's possible, but it's challenging. And especially when you're looking at transit dependent people that maybe, have some other issues already, those transfers and waiting, especially then if the weather is polar vortexy or things like that, it opens up a bunch of different challenges.
And Courtney might be looking up the numbers, but just off of memory, it is utilized obviously by Cary residents, being kind of in the heart of Algonquin Township's base of operation, much like the Southeast McHenry County service out of Pace. The data collection has shown that these services are utilized. Obviously, the main question as we move forward with the implementation of our budget is the direction from the board to integrate MC Ride into our operation and budget. The cost is there, and the other options will still remain, at least for the foreseeable future. But all three currently as they exist are utilized, and obviously MC Ride would then allow that destination, that request for trips to originate and carry a little more easily. But that, and with that, we're seeking the direction whether or not to proceed with the process with McHenry County to initiate that agreement through the at least the Joint Transportation Committee, that we would work with them.
What about the funding? And I'm sorry, I might have missed it from earlier, but can the county respond on the back end funding? So obviously there would be the village's portion, but where is the rest of the funding coming from?
Sure. So let me just pull it. In 2018, MC Ride was about a $2.3 million program, so it's a big program. 46% approximately comes from PACE subsidies, 10% from rider fares, so what you pay when you get on the bus. About 10% comes from all of the combined municipalities and townships. So all of the partners, that 22,000 that you see up there, everybody has a contribution. So all of those make up about 10% of the program costs. We get federal Section 5310 funding, which is enhancing the mobility of seniors and people with disabilities. That covers about 28% of our costs. So that's a huge factor in allowing our partner contributions to be so low. And then the county makes up the rest of that, which is about 5%, not including in-kind staff and things like that.
So there is some, you said some federal funding that's involved in this,
Yes.
and then PACE subsidies.
Yes.
And what would happen if those would go away?
I mean, we would have to take a serious look at the organization structure. So as far as PACE subsidies, probably Mary could speak to that a little bit better, but PACE and the county, representing all of our local partners, it's definitely a collaboration. It's in theory kind of 50-50, all of these local funding sources and PACE. But the 5310, the federal funds, as everyone knows, any federal grant, that it's a grant. We do, however, we made the next 2-year program. So we asked for, is that 1.2? Yeah, 1.2 million for the next 2 years. So 600,000 for federal fiscal year, I think 18 and 19. So that, still has to go through the final RTA approval process. We are tentatively on that program for that money. So, but again, you're right. Beyond that, you never with any grant money can you say absolutely. So it would be a serious reorganization, and we'd all have to, we work through our Public Transportation Advisory Committee, and we would have to, think about reorganizing, restructuring.
Thank
I have a
you.
question for you.
Yeah.
You said you had numbers that Cary residents were already using your service. Do you know what those numbers are?
Oh, yes, I just pulled, just briefly, I looked at I didn't do trips or anything, but there was just already 22 riders that are already, and that's.
I'm
that's
sorry, I
a-
missed that one.
22.
22.
So that's just a unique rider.
Right.
And I don't know how many trips those 22 riders, because a lot of times we have X number of riders that are each taking many, many, many trips, so. But I think my point was just that, like, people are already trying to
Trying to
use
get
it,
to it.
yeah.
To more directly address your question about what happens if the federal funding goes away, this is a one-year agreement with the Village of Cary, between the village and the county. And so if, as Susan already mentioned, the county is the funder of last resort. If the federal funding dries up, the county's paying for all of the difference that was being made up by federal funding. And if that does happen, the village has the decision, you can make the decision not to participate the following year if we decided to raise the contribution level for the village. So again, it's a year-to-year contract between the village and the county. The county is ultimately the funder. We hold all the risk when it comes to the financial aspect of this program. You're capped at $22,839 for the year.
So if we were to sign up with McBride, do you provide us with the numbers of actual usage
Yes.
by our residents?
Yes. And what's interesting, the previous meeting, there was a lot of talking about development. Not only are your riders able to get places, people are able to come to you now. So you essentially have all of our 20-some partners now that can access the village. So it works both ways. And we do breakdowns of origins and destinations, and the numbers are not always exactly equal. Some. Yeah, so it is interesting to think of it that way too. You're helping your residents, but you're also helping your community people get here to get to all these great places.
I have a question for you. What about a unique situation with students? Maybe their parents' car broke down, or it's consistently that they need help getting to school and they're not able to be bused. How do you guys allow, I'm talking grade school students, so not high school. Do you guys allow that?
Typically not. Usually our policy is that riders have to be 12 years or older to ride on, by themselves. That's our typical policy. And it's challenging, again, to make those school trips. If it was an every single day thing, I'm sure that it has happened in the past, but typically that's usually a school district type of issue. Do you have other things about that?
Yeah, for just a second, when you talk about contributions, PACE puts in 46% of the funds for this. We actually, in many ways, match the county, $1.2 million to $1.2 million. Part of that is because we are funded with RTA sales tax dollars. So if you want to get the best bang for your buck, we are here to make sure that McHenry County is whole. For a number of years, we were considered a donor county, and every village within this whole county voted against the RTA sales tax, and you got it anyway. So you may as well put the money back into where it's coming from. Once you have those 22, you have your 22 individual people, once they know that there is service here, that's going to grow exponentially.
Do you
It
guys
does
track the
everywhere.
service right now?
I'm sorry?
Do you track the service for residents of Cary that use PACE right now? Do you know where they originate or who the riders
Are
are
you talking about for the Southeast or MC?
Yes,
for Southeast?
Southeast.
Southeast is big.
I should be able to get that information for you. I just, at the moment, I asked for some numbers this morning, and it's been a very crazy day, so
Yep.
didn't get them. But it's kind of like, if you don't want the service, you're going to lose all of the RTA sales tax benefits that you have here. So you may as, it's a good bang for your buck, I guess, is what I want to say.
did want to mention one other thing when it comes to program policies about students or whatever else. All the partners that are part of this program decide what the policies of this program are. This is a collaboration, not only between the county and PACE, but between the county, PACE, and all of our local sponsors. So if the Village of Cary did decide to join this program, they'd be part of our steering committee. They would have a hand in crafting what these policies look like. So nothing's set in stone. We're constantly changing the program. So we could always change going forward.
How often do those steering committees happen, and when do policies change?
Yeah, so it's called PTAC, so Public Transportation Advisory Committee. They're quarterly. The next one is August 1st, if anyone wants another really exciting meeting to go to. But it's quarterly. We do reports on MC Ride at each meeting, and then so this meeting in August, typically we'll start talking about 2020. And so anyone brings up issues throughout the year, and essentially PTAC advises the Transportation Committee of the County Board. So they make a recommendation, and then it goes through our typical board process to get final approval on anything, especially involving money, the funding or anything.
Is that something that you'd be willing to bring up, a question that I have about students
Sure.
utilizing it?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can I ask you a question about just your whole role in McHenry County? What oversight do you have for townships? Like, I've been watching, their transportation, I've been watching what's been going on up in McHenry County, or McHenry Township. It's frightening, as to what's going on and the outpour of people that are used to doing this. And I'll be quite honest with you, one of my fears is that we implement something that we have to take away. And those are very difficult decisions to make. I look at these, the PACE Southeast, and it looks more affordable for people to do. There is no direct cost to us, but are we hitting all the different residents and people that would be looking at that? I'd be really interested to get, I don't know if you have at your disposal, the hard numbers that you have for residents that utilize your service in Cary. I know you said that there's 22, but out of that 22, is it the same person? Is it the same place? Do you have that type? Do you track that?
I could try and pull that, yeah. There are 22 different people, unique riders. It's separate reports, so it would be not at my fingertips I could get it, but I don't obviously have where they're going or anything like that. I think one of the important points too, if you could go back a slide to that one. That one. So, what's interesting is there were a bunch of Cary residents that have origins and destinations that are riding the Southeast, some of them to Pioneer Center. But what's interesting, if you're looking at those, those bar charts, it's about 520, something average rides for the month. We're up in the, between 8,000 to 9,000 a month. So I think one of the things with the Southeast that you have to remember is if you really wanted to provide it to everyone, PACE would have to answer, can the Southeast, do they have the capacity? If you really wanted to give all of your residents true access, can that Southeast, have the capacity to do that? That's always one of the things, because 550 average rides compared to 8,500 is a big difference.
And it's one bus normally for the South.
Again, Mary, I don't know if I think it's 1 to 2 from that data that we had data that they had given us a while back, and it looked like 1 to 2.
Yes.
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 So.
Also, with your concern with McHenry Township, what they're working with really has nothing much to do with MC Ride. They're two different programs.
Right. But I didn't know if the county had oversight over transportation issues.
No. So McHenry Township is interesting because they're a partner. They are one of our partners, one of our 8 township partners. In addition to that, they have chosen to have that senior bus program in addition, almost like a overlay service. So that program, although they are our partner in MC Ride, they're independent of us as far as their senior bus program. So.
But I think to your point though, Mayor, is we need to be cautious here if this is something we want to dip our toe in the water on. I wouldn't recommend taking this away. There's residents that they adjust their lives related to this. They may take a job, may get rid of their car because the service is available. And then we find that we can't fund it and it goes away, that becomes problematic for people. So I think if we're going to fund this, it needs to be for the long haul.
Actually, I'd like to see a hybrid of Southeast McHenry County and MC Ride. I think that may, I don't know, just when you look at the figures and the stats there, and that's why I'm curious to know, do you track people coming into Cary from surrounding communities? Do you know any?
Well, so in theory, there should be no one currently on MC Ride. Southeast is a, different program. None of our trips should begin or end in the
Cary.
Village of Cary because it's not in the service area.
Okay.
Right. So right now, those 22 riders are getting on
Transfer.
elsewhere, right? Either they catch a ride with a friend or whatever they're doing.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
So.
And now they see also, you see that Fox River Grove is now part of the program. So you have Crystal Lake as part of the program, and then you have Fox River Grove as part of the program, and then you guys are in the middle, and you're talking about a transit desert. Except for the Southeast. And you've got to know that that exists. And there isn't anybody that I know of who's promoting Southeast McHenry County trips, except that it happens to be on the list of what's available in the county.
Right. Pace doesn't actively market the Southeast, probably, because of the capacity. I mean, I take a lot of the calls at the Division of Transportation, and I do get quite a number of calls from Cary residents asking questions, and I try to refer them to the Southeast because or the township, but otherwise there's not a ton of, marketing out there for the Southeast.
And to put an exclamation point on something Susan said earlier, really, we get a lot of calls for people who want to work in Cary and can't drive for whatever reason, but they can't get to Cary because you're not part of this program. And so if you live in McHenry and want to get to Cary because that's where you work, you're out of luck. And what this program would allow you to do is you could then ride with one trip from your home to your business in Cary. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that. We get calls all the time from people who work in Cary who can't get there due to lack of transit.
Yeah, and the way that the train schedules run, it's great that there is Metro service out here, but it doesn't always facilitate early morning getting to work type of trips just because of the schedule. A lot of it is getting into the city. So there are those people that, are looking for work transportation.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? I think that we have, what I'm taking away from this, there's some questions that we need answered from Trustee Weinhammer, Trustee Collier, and perhaps myself. If we can get that data, sooner than later, I don't know if that's something that's a keystroke that you can do, or, it doesn't have to be pretty, it's just if we can just get some hardcore
Well,
data.
I cannot get data for the Southeast. Pace will
Well,
have to do that.
for what you're presenting,
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah, I can
presenting
get
to us.
those, try and
22.
find the riders where they're going, but it won't show you where they would go
Yeah.
if the village was accessible
Right.
to them. So, and I will bring that up at the PTAC meeting regarding the students.
Thank you.
As a discussion point, I can't say that they will or won't have like a firm, answer on it, but we'll certainly discuss it. And again, everyone, 2:00 on August 1st. The admin.
And I still want us to just make sure we have everything for, I'd like an update from the Algonquin Township too. I just want to see how many we have and if we can get information out. If we're doing something like, for example, if we're doing things now, getting things weekly to the seniors, dropping it off at the senior center, because that's a lot of times people that they really need these services. So there may be a lot of people that need it and just don't have any idea that there's anything out there whatsoever. So I'd love to see if we can get some communication, some dialogue going and get some information to see where we're at, if we get some data, some actual data on some of the stuff that's going on. Mary, did you say you could get something on Southeast to know how many people are roughly riding it? Yeah, that's fine.
Do you
Yeah.
want like a monthly number, a weekly number?
I would think monthly.
I
What do
think
you
monthly
think?
would be, should be sufficient.
Okay, I'll get that.
I mean, I think we all want to make a well-informed, wise decision, and I know, I don't think Algonquin's not, is Algonquin not using it, and Lake in the Hills is not using it?
Lake in the Hills is not, Algonquin is not yet, but they have the 550. And the 550, which is a fixed route going down Randall Road or up Randall Road, will take you to the Crystal Lake Metro Station, which is then part of MC Ride, and
Got it.
you can
Transfer.
get anywhere from there. But there's something I was going to
Well, when you remember, just send it out. Send it to Jake or Eric or,
I know what it is. As soon as you get to working with the townships are relegated to seniors and disabled.
right,
They don't do general. public.
correct.
So that knocks out any kids
School.
in school, any college kids, any high school kids, unless you're a senior or disabled, and senior, is considered 60? 60, you can't, you just can't do it.
Okay.
It's called Dillon's Law, that if it says you can, then you can, and if it doesn't say it in the law, then you can't. And Roosevelt would say, well, nobody said I couldn't, so let me try. So, so it depends on how you look at it. There are townships that do, but McHenry County has traditionally and historically been, that's it. Seniors and disabled for the townships.
The Algonquin Township Senior Bus has about 95 Cary residents on their list.
And they have how many buses? I think they have 2.
I want to say it's 2.
I want to
Is
say
that
it's
right?
2. I don't.
I have no idea.
remember. So how many people can, how many people can you take in a day?
Right, right.
And at what cost from that as well?
It's definitely intriguing. Anybody else have any questions?
Can sorry to interrupt, just to point out, it sounds really early, but by like September, October, we'll be starting the 2020 IGA. So by October, typically what we do, we have the revisions for the next year. We let all of our partners review it. Our state's attorney has to review it. And then because of our budget year, we start that process. So I'm just letting you know that's kind of what our timetable is for 2020.
And sort of selfishly, obviously, the more villages we add in a given year, that increases our cost at the county. So we need to know sooner rather than later whether the village is interested for 2020, because we're going to need to budget accordingly to do that. So
If we were to sign up for this, what would the time frame be to start it, and when would it start? Your next budget cycle?
we would look to start it on January 1st, 2020.
Right.
That would be sort of what our timeline would. But we could work with the village if you wanted it to be later than that. That's perfectly
Right.
fine.
But that would probably be, given Pace and their contractors need typically about 3 months to make significant program, changes where they're adding, new service areas. So, if you think about trying to get before January 1st, we're getting tight on time. So
Okay.
probably that's when it would be.
Do you have numbers for how many people in Fox River Grove use it?
I do. And I like to point out, anytime we talk about that, Bernie mentioned the Sunday service, it really does take a while to ramp up. We rely a lot on local marketing efforts. We try and do marketing, but it's like the 3 of us to try and market. So it does take a while for service to kind of kick up. A lot of our heavily, traveled areas had previous dial rides that then merged. So I do have Fox River Grove numbers for you, but I would like to preface that by saying they just started and, they're really trying to just get ramped up. So.
Good. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Very informative. Eric, you up on, are you and the chief going to do parking restrictions?
Chief's gonna take it.
Okay.
We'll do this in concert. But this is just kind of a review of the parking ordinance. It was 0180102 that was enacted January 2018. Just a couple of things, and the reason I struck out all this stuff is I'm only going to talk about the parking restrictions along very narrow roadways. Everything else I can mention, but that's what the focus will be. And this is just a map of the restrictions when we first presented this information. I think this is what's more important is we were trying to address those areas where parking restriction made sense so that there would be easy traveling of the roadway, especially in areas where, for example, school buses travel. There are some very narrow roadways in Cary, and then they're kind of graduated, and I believe that we have a schedule about that, but primarily, we had restricted parking on one side of the roadway on all of these streets, and it would be on the north side of the roadway, because that's the side that had the fire hydrant on it. And the reason for that is, I got one more, but the pictures here kind of illustrate the fact that when you have parking on both sides of the roadway in these areas, you can't bring two vehicles traveling in opposite or conflicting directions through that area. Someone has to pull over to the side, let another vehicle through. So again, what we did on that ordinance is addressed athletic parking events, because we had addressed it in a certain way that was kind of hard to enforce, but now it's more related to hour and time of day. The Arrowhead subdivision, the overnight parking permission authority, but that both the Director Morimoto and I have temporary parking restrictions, allowing us to post temporary parking restrictions on certain routes when we're having events, and then parking during and after snowfalls. So I initially looked at this from the Eldon Drive, and Eldon is on the far left-hand side, and it's a pretty wide roadway. It's between 26 and 28 feet wide. So you can see when there's vehicles parked on both sides, you can still get two vehicles through those areas. The center picture is a picture of Wagner Drive, and I did that at 5:35 today. So that, and it just happened that I parked my car on the side across from another vehicle to kind of illustrate that the restriction on the travel, and then 3 or 4 cars were coming through there. So it was timely in regards to that. And the final picture on there, or illustration, shows that the roadway is about 22 feet wide. So when we looked at this, maybe you should talk about this.
Just in how we analyze the various roadways throughout the village, we try to give it a bit of a subjective, an objective point of view in how we classify roads and how we determine which ones warrant the restrictions of parking on one side and which ones don't. Utilizing some industry standards and the typical vehicle widths that are involved in typical traffic, these are the 4 breakdowns that we came up with. And based on the widths that were measured on Wagner, obviously that would fall into that class 3 category. So it is one that, with the other streets that we've looked at the 2018 ordinance, it would fall into that same realm of potential for consideration for parking restrictions on one side. The other factor obviously is traffic volume and the amount of parking that tends to occur. If it's just sporadic, one car here and there, and typically not on the same, right next to each other, like in this illustration, it really only is a problem when you have multiple cars in a row on both sides. Then there's not that gap for someone to pull over and pass and get through that center opening. The volume of traffic is the other big factor. Obviously, the less traffic, the less conflicts that tend to occur. So in the case of Wagner, it is one of the only east-west streets from Eldon, because it is the furthest south point on Eldon to go towards First Street. The next street in order to get over to First from Eldon, I believe, is Alma
Terrace.
Terrace, or I would have a map there, or Frank.
Yeah.
It is several
Probably
blocks. You have to go
Frankie.
north of the church to get there. So that being said, the amount of cars that would tend to travel on Wagner, even though it's a smaller street, is probably more in line with a very low volume collector street as opposed to a pure residential street. So due to the width and the volumes and the traffic and parking patterns that we're observing, from staff's perspective, it is one that is eligible for this parking restriction on one side if the board would like to have that considered. Resident input obviously is another factor. This is one where it wasn't discussed at the other groupings just because of the volume of traffic is a little different, and there's not a park like Jamesway Park is a kind of a big parking generator for some of the streets and the other streets that we are implementing that restriction on. So it is something that we would obviously want to weigh the resident factor as well, not being able to park on the one side of the road.
So if there was a desire to restrict parking on Wagner, we would restrict it on the north side because that's the fire hydrant side. And that would certainly alleviate some of those issues related to those conflicting traffic maneuvers as it relates to opposing vehicles. So is there, okay, we can talk about that.
Well,
at the end.
before we get into Charlotte Place, so we have those initial parking restrictions that Chief Inland brought up. We are in the process right now of getting the signs ordered, and they will be put up this calendar year by our village staff. Trustee Kraus, you had the question about Wagner. Was this sufficient? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the final thing that we were going to talk about is Charlotte Place, and this is an interesting riddle. It's a riddle because there's 4 different types of either restriction or no restriction. There's the black line is no restriction. The red line is restriction, no parking 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. The blue line is a 4-hour parking between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then the green line, which is the majority of this area that is bounded by Spring on the east and South on the west, is 4-hour parking 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And to be honest with you, I have no idea why they had these restrictions in place. I don't. So the Director Morimoto and I believe that the majority of the restrictions are the no 4-hour parking 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. If there's a desire to have it restricted there, and there might be a spillover from the downtown area, that's the only thing that we could come up with, that we could sign the whole street in 1 restriction instead of having 4.
Where is Charlotte Place? I'm trying to read on the map.
Just,
Directly south of downtown. So it is, Cary Street is the first street south of Main Street, the bottom edge of the downtown district. This is the next street south of that.
there's a bunch of townhouses up over there.
You just aren't thinking about it. It's right behind there.
And kind of further confusing it all, there's this very broad mix of signs posted out there. The current ordinance, as it is codified, doesn't match any of that. So
That's the other part of the riddle.
so we
I
we
feel
can't
like we're on a
force,
train line here, the red line, the black line. It'd be a lot easier if it was consistent.
We're trying to have a legend so that it would be easy to.
It's fine, it's good. We're talking
to illustrate.
transportation.
So I guess the advice we're looking for or direction is that appropriate restriction that should be placed in that area.
We're just looking to clean it up here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, what's your professional opinion? You want to have it all the same, right?
Yeah, well, it makes it easier to enforce,
4-hour
number
parking,
one.
6
Yeah, but I don't know why they did it this way, why they restricted it this way.
Where's Cooker when you need him?
Yes.
Years, I
There,
think.
but it might have been more when there was less parking for the Metra and there was spillover. But right now, there's not a lot of, I didn't see a lot of cars parked out there on the street at that time period. And I'm certain that over the weekend, they didn't want restrictions because people would be visiting those townhouses.
I'm fine with
I
this.
am too.
I'm fine with
Yeah,
this.
I'm good.
You guys are only looking at making the changes with what you presented here, not anywhere else.
No, we'll make sure that the ordinance matches what we're going to do on the street. So that would be the kind of the review of what we presented, and it's very greatly abbreviated here. So any questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Next is a discussion concerning a bullying ordinance.
So I did some research on the bullying ordinance, and there's a government site called stopbullying.gov, and they identify 3 types of bullying: verbal, social, and physical. Physical is the easiest one for me because that's a crime, right? Battery or an assault. That's relatively an easy solution to that problem, but the verbal and the social really kind of addresses things that might be subjective as it relates to the receiver versus the sender. So I figured that I'd start with this because we're going to get into the definition later on from both the City of Plover and then from the Illinois compiled statutes. And as it indicates here, bullying happens, during schools and but playground and buses and things of that nature. But when we started talking about this, when I started doing the research on this, the City of Plover did not indicate ages. So it's kind of for all of any of those issues related to bullying, number one, and they did include it in their employee manual as well. There's also, during my research, I found a publication that relates bullying to suicide, and basically what they did say in this is that there's really no direct conflict that they know of, right? A direct connection between bullying and suicide directly. There's plenty of school-age youth that get bullied and don't commit suicide, and there's plenty of, or some people that commit suicide that were never bullied. So they didn't have a connection in regards to the bullying. But what I did find interesting was this quote that I found, and it says that, much of the media coverage is focused on blame and criminal justice intervention rather than evidence-based action-oriented prevention, which is kind of the way that Illinois went. So the City of Plover has their bullying ordinance, bullying harassment ordinance, and the City of Plover started it, and then the City of Wisconsin Rapids adopted it as well. I had more luck finding it at the City of Plover than anything in regards to Wisconsin Rapids. But what's important here is that they talk about a course of conduct. So it's not a single incident, it's a course of conduct. And when I spoke to Superintendent Coleman from District 26, that's the way they handle it as well, is it has to be a course of conduct. It's not a single incident that occurs. And then here, it's any form of harassment is defined as an intentional course of conduct which reasonably likely to intimidate, emotionally abuse, slander, or threaten another person, which serves no legitimate purpose. And when I read that, by the way, I thought about when I was in the Army and I was berated by my drill sergeant, thinking that that must have been a legitimate purpose, right? And then, again, there's retaliation is prohibited. The part that we were talking about here, and I think that's what brought our attention to this, was that there's a parental responsibility issue, and that is that the parent would now be responsible for the conduct of the child, which when I started looking at some of the legislative intent in Illinois, there was great debate about, and the ACLU was kind of thrown around in regards to maybe having some issues related to the ability to do that. Some of the parental responsibility ordinances that I'm aware of either relate to the parent or guardian being responsible for the damage that's caused by the juvenile, or they're directly responsible for their own behavior, like providing alcohol to juveniles. And I don't know if maybe our attorney, Euler, has any insight in regards to the ability to hold someone accountable for somebody else's conduct.
Well, it doesn't have a knowingly, it doesn't have a provision that the parent would be engaging in the behavior in some knowing fashion. This creates a rebuttable presumption. I can see where the ACLU might raise a due process concern on that basis.
And, as always, but wait, there's more, because there has to be a notice. So there is a notice that they provide, and this is what it looks like. So the notice is that law enforcement from the City of Plover would give whoever was the parent of the person that was identified as the bullying party. I noticed it said that they were noticed that on this time, at this date, someone that they were responsible for engaged in conduct that wasn't allowed under this ordinance. But what was interesting to me, and this is found in the New York Times article, that they've had this, but they've yet to impose a fine. So they've given these letters out, but they've not taken any enforcement action as a result of the ordinance.
Is that because the behavior changed?
I don't know. That I don't know. And then the sanction for this is that for a first offense, I found this very interesting myself. The first offense is $500, but if you default on that, you can be imprisoned for up to 90 days. And then the second offense, it's 20 to 1,000. You default, you could be sentenced to the county jail for 6 months. Which now raises something else in regards to our, the threshold, right? And it now has become guilt beyond a reasonable doubt versus a preponderance of the evidence.
Excuse me, sorry.
So, so that was the city of Plover. Now, what we have in Illinois is the bullying prevention is found in the school code. So I highlighted what in Illinois bullying is not allowed for, and it covers a lot of issues related to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, ancestry, age, marital status, physical or mental disability, military status, sexual orientation, gender-related identity or expression, unfavorable discharge from military service, association with a person or group with one or more of the aforementioned actual or perceived characteristics, or any other distinguishing characteristic. That's pretty broad.
Yeah.
And then what I found when I spoke to Superintendent Coleman was that in this statute, under the school code, not only are they responsible for the bullying that occurs on their property, but also if it occurs off their property and it's disruptive to any actions that occur on their property. And then it also includes the playgrounds and the buses and things of that nature. Then it also includes cyberbullying, and it expands it to say that it could be the school's computer network or somebody else's computer network. It doesn't matter. It involves a student-to-student type of bullying, that it falls under their jurisdiction or their responsibility. And this is just cyberbullying in terms of, basically, it's an electronic communication. And this is what has to be found in the policy for the school district. I just kind of wrote them down real quick. There's like 12 different items that have to be in there. And the school district has those items basically in their policy. If you go on their website, you can get that policy that they have related to bullying prevention. But when I looked at this, I wanted to see what the legislative intent was, because I didn't give you everything I found because I just found it today. But under House Bill 2950, this was to address more of the making it more flexible and making sure that it's not just found in a handbook, that it's something that they have to proactively provide for their staff. Now, I looked at the other the public acts that were related to the bullying or the school code, and one of them occurs in 2014. And what was interesting in regard to that, and I have that with me, I was just reading it before we had the meeting, was that they had great debate whether or not this was a school issue or not. There was discussion in regard to it not being a school issue and that it should be law enforcement. But they didn't vote on it initially. I forget the term, it's a parliamentary procedure, proposed reconsider, So they pulled it so that they wouldn't have a vote on it, and then they continued to debate it. So there was even debate in the legislature about where this responsibility lies, for who's responsible for, trying to address bullying. And then I found a very obscure Illinois statute called the Improper Supervision of Children Act. And one of the issues that a parent is responsible for is for their juvenile under 18 is committing any act tends to break the peace or violate a municipal curfew or ordinance. And then the sanctions are relatively minor in regards to this, between $25 and $50, and then they could be guilty of a Class B misdemeanor on a third or subsequent time that they're responsible, the juvenile responsible for was to commit something that was prohibited by this statute. And I did ask someone at the state attorney's office if they've ever had any prosecutions under this, and they said no. They couldn't remember that it was, and I can't remember anyone ever initiating a prosecution in regards to this. So again, I did have a discussion with Superintendent Coleman. I did learn that they have a policy at the District 26 that they address bullying behavior that occurs at school or impacts school activities. The schools, what he did say, which was interesting to me, was that the schools tend to have personnel that are more experienced in dealing with juvenile issues. And, law enforcement is kind of a big stick. But again, going back to that, proactive, preventive type of action, he was indicating that, they have more experience doing this. But he did make it perfectly clear that it's a continuing course of conduct, not a single event. And it can be difficult, to wrap your arms around what is a bullying behavior. So it's kind of a very difficult problem to solve.
I have a question. So let's say that a child in, a school like, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade is constantly assaulting physically, like punching and hitting other kids or the same kid over and over, and the police are contacted and they can't do anything because the child is under a certain age. So it's really, you guys turn it over to the school, and it's just, that's my question.
Well, it depends, because there's a defense called infancy, which basically indicates that a person's not responsible for their actions under 13, I believe. But in that case, there is a potential to petition that juvenile court. I don't believe that there would be, a lot of action taken on it. And I think it would be more of a responsibility for the school district to try to remove that individual from.
And that doesn't happen. So the police don't do anything, and then the school doesn't do anything, and then, we have like nothing in place. And
Well, but I would also say that the Wisconsin ordinance, if that was our template, would not have anything more than a monetary sanction to it.
And for juveniles, juvenile programs are more rehabilitative. I mean, monetary punishments tend to just hurt the parents. So a lot of the juvenile justice system looks to seek looks to rehabilitative programs versus those.
so
And there's
so under the age of 13, they wouldn't be qualifying for rehabilitative programs, is that how it would?
Yes, they do in schools.
do.
Yeah.
There's a mandate in the school systems that they have to use restorative measures, social work
And
That
you
was
can always
word.
work
services,
with
psychological
parents
counseling.
and refer them.
Exactly.
But-
The social work.
And that
Social
was
services.
the superintendent's point, was they have those abilities or those resources within the schools. When we were discussing basically, responsibility and why did it end up in the schools versus, not law enforcement. But I will tell you that it was House Bill 4207 in the 98th Legislative Assembly on May 20th, 2014. May 20th is only important because it's my wedding anniversary, so that's why I remembered it. And that is that they had great debate over whether or not this was a school issue or a law enforcement issue. So that didn't get lost with the legislators when they were talking about this.
Is there a threshold where it becomes law enforcement's issue when they're underage or no?
Well, that's why I said physical.
Major crime. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that, and your
Punching somebody is
reciprocal
not
reporting
considered
agreement
that,
set
right?
forth the basis
Somebody
upon which you
severely
have
put
to
in
make
the
a report.
hospital is?
Hey, I can't hear it, Dale.
Yeah, one conversation at a time, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I missed
Dale, what was your
No, no.
question?
I just asked if it ever is a law enforcement issue.
Yes.
Sure, and that's why I
It's a
said,
major crime.
when we were talking about, verbal versus emotional versus physical, physical's easy. It's the verbal and the emotional that's kind of difficult to kind of quantify or define. Did I answer your question in regards to everything we were talking about?
I believe so. You
Okay.
said that it's a school thing and
Well, that's kind of where the legislature kind of assigned it, number one, but I believe that Attorney Euler indicated, rightly so, that there's also reciprocating reporting agreements that are established between school districts, and if there's something that's serious that occurs at a school, they have to tell the police department.
There's drugs, weapons, assault on a staff member.
say that, sorry, say that again?
There are categories of offenses that have to be reported by the school system to the local law enforcement agency. And those include weapons, drugs, assault on a staff member. There are a number of categories that have to be built into those agreements.
Almost like criminal activity. So you're mandatory reporters.
That's
And
for
mandatory
abuse.
reporters, yes.
Yeah, that's for abuse.
Right.
So with school, and we don't have to get into the weeds with schools, but schools do have layers and layers and layers of interventions that they're charged with using, multi-tiered systems of support with kids that show up on their radar with behavior issues, whether they're special education or not. So they have to follow a number of layers of supports before they would utilize law enforcement. That would be a last step.
Does it switch though when they get to a certain age?
Yes.
18.
It's
No, what happens
different
when they're
depending on
above
the
12?
age.
Because a lot of you are saying under 12, there's a certain, what happens
12 and
between
under, yeah.
13 and, what happens 13 to 18?
But there are
Is there any
certain things
differences?
called automatic, what do they call it? What happens is if it's committed by a juvenile, there's an assignment to the adult court under certain circumstances.
Got it.
I forget what they call it. It escapes me right now. Anyways, there are certain things like murder and things like that that get
That might get someone's
assigned.
attention.
Something like that. So anyway, my summary here is that it appears that the Wisconsin ordinance aren't used for enforcement, rather they're the threat of enforcement and the use of a notice to place somebody on notice. The Illinois legislature appears to have been identified the responsibility for this to be with education right now, or at least when the statute was addressed. As I indicated before, evidence-based action-oriented prevention seems to be what the Center for Disease Control and the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control suggest in regards to this. And the Illinois compiled statutes do have a provision for holding parents, legal guardians, and other persons accountable for improper actions of children under 18. And like I said, there was no evidence that it's ever been charged that I have any information about. And overall, it's just a very difficult issue to define and identify. And, do we expand it to not only school-aged individuals, but beyond that? So that is the sum and substance of my information that I found on this. Can I answer any more questions or any discussion?
So I guess in essence, it falls back on the education system. Unless something major
And
happens. What-
and I think with regards to the workplace are going to have their own set of rules.
Yeah, and bullying's different than harassment because harassment generally requires a protected class. But, bullying again is something that sometimes is in the eye of the beholder in regards to, how it's perceived.
Do you guys receive a lot of calls about bullying or no?
No, and that's probably because District 26 handles it.
Internally.
Yeah,
But also the-
internally.
Right, and a lot of people don't report bullying also.
But when
Yeah.
people do reach out to you, you guys can't help if they're under the age of 13.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure that the school's notified and things of that nature, and we can contact the parent to let them know what's going on. And that is one of the things that was part of the City of Plover ordinance, was that there was, affirmative notice to the parent, legal guardian of the juvenile. However, it was only within 90 days. So if that behavior doesn't occur again, then you start the clock all over again, which makes it very difficult to enforce, from my standpoint.
Was there anything else that you wanted to get out of this?
Not at this time, no.
Appreciate all the research that you did.
Well, one of the
Thank
things
you.
that Jake and I talked about this agenda before is maybe that we do something from a policing standpoint, with using our school resource officer or something to have conversations with people that are in this type of a situation. I don't know how that would work, but, if it's repetitive and there's issues that, I know for a fact that when one of my kids was at the junior high, police were called in and they questioned a number of kids with regards to things, and so that there was some enforcement with that, but.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was bullying versus some type of criminal act that they were kind of trying to identify an offender for. So, again, bullying it's not as easy situation to solve. And again, I think that that publication in regards to bullying and suicide got it right in terms of, we kind of go to, law enforcement sometimes to try to solve it, when now the trend is to try to address it from other means.
It's very informative.
It is, really.
And
A lot of research, thank you.
Attorney Euler has your firm was basically school-based, wasn't it? Clanthorpe Jenkins?
We do a lot of schoolwork.
Yeah. So I forgot about that until you started talking. I said, that's right.
Can I ask a question about future agenda items, or is that only at the village board meeting?
What did you want to?
Just possible talking about marijuana dispensaries here.
Yeah, we could put that on, that's something we need to discuss
Okay.
sooner than later. That's great, ed, yeah.
Okay.
We could do that,
Right after bowling.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea, thanks. All right, I will pardon me?
We'll just go ahead and cancel this.
Cancel the executive session? Okay,
Yeah. Yeah,
there's nothing.
We didn't have really a meeting.
yeah, there's nothing really.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and cancel. We're not going into executive
Oh,
session.
darn.
I know. Some of you
We're all
do, some of you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There are no nays. Is that good, Scott?